we'll be using this topology whereby I have AS200 on the right and AS100 on the left. AS200 is IPv4 only, AS100 is IPv6 only. And we'll do configurations on the NAT64 device and the DNS server whereby we'll enable DNS64. So let's go ahead and begin. First thing I'm going to do is to test reachability. Let's see whether we can reach example.com. And yeah, we don't have an entry for that in DNS. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is confirm from the DNS server, the forward zone, whether we have an entry, code A entry for this server. So you can see we only have an A record. And remember, the Windows node, the Windows host is v6 only. And also our server is v6 only. And we're trying to reach the v4 only server. So right now it's not possible. And if I start a capture and we see what's happening. So let me start it and ping again. Let me flash the DNS cache and ping again. So you can see we're sending the query. We're querying for example.com, but the reply doesn't have an answer. That's from the server because the server doesn't have that entry. So next thing we're going to do is to enable DNS64 on the bind 9. And to enable DNS64 is just one line. I'm just going to do a simple configuration. Enabling DNS64 and also specifying my network specific prefix, which will also be configured in the NAT64 device. Of course, you can specify more options like the access controllers who should be able to use or go through this process of translation. Then after restarting the server, we'll test again. So clear the cache and ping example.com. So this time round, if I execute the ping, let me scroll up. Yeah, so we send the query and this time around we get a response from the server. And if you look at the answer, you'll notice that the response is a synthesized IPv6 address, whereby we are combining our network specific prefix with the IPv4 address of the server in hex. So DNS64 is set up. Let's go ahead and configure the NAT64 box. So at least our configuration is working up until the NAT64 device. So we send the query, get the reply, and then the pings. The destination is unreachable because the NAT64 device is not yet configured, which we're going to do right now. First thing that we're going to do is to enable NAT64 on the interfaces. Then the next thing that we're going to do is globally enable NAT64. First thing is the prefix. Remember the prefix that we configured on the DNS64 server should also be the same on the NAT64 device. And in this case, we're doing stateful translation. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is specify a pool of addresses. So this pool basically is just IPv4 addresses that will be used to represent the internal hosts externally. So we'll receive a v6 packet and then translate the v6, the source address, using this IPv4 addresses in the pool. Before we use the pool, we need to specify an access list. Whereby we are permitting the IPv6 prefix for our host. So if you check in our topology, so this is basically the prefix that's connecting to the host. So we're just saying when you receive any packet from that prefix, we are going to use NAT64 or the pool of IPv4 addresses to translate the source address. So I'm going to do, this command should be done globally. So I'm going to exit and then type in the command again. So we're doing v6 to v4 and we're using the NAT64, the access list. And then the pool is Afrinic, which is the range of IPv4 addresses, and overload. So we'll also do port address translation. Next thing we're going to do is to enable this prefix to be reachable from the AS200, and we'll do this via BGP. So AS200 needs to know how to get to our pool of addresses, right? So I'm going to enable this prefix in BGP, under BGP. Then I'm also going to create a null zero, a default route pointing to null zero. Basically, we just need the prefix to be learned by the router in AS200. So all looks set. I think it's time to go ahead and do some verifications. I'll start a capture before we do that. As usual, we'll do the verification from the Windows host. I'm going to flash the DNS cache. And we're going to, instead of pinging this time round, I'm going to use the browser to connect to www.example.com, which I have configured, the web server configured. So I can see we can connect, and let's go ahead and ping just to verify example.com, and we have reachability. So let's look at the captures and see what we have. I'm going to scroll up. Yeah, so we can see a lot of greens, good sign. So we had the query, and then we had the response from the server with the synthesized IPv6 address. And then remember, after that, I initiated communication to the server. So we have the scenes in ARC and the ARC, and then we start exchanging information. So if you look at the packet capture between the two routers externally, so you'll see that we're now using the v4 address as the source. So we had the translation being done, and we're using the v4 address from our pool as the source and the v4 address as the destination. Whilst internally, we use the v6 addresses and the synthesized address from DNS64 as the destination address to the server. So verifying on the NAT64 device, I'm going to show NAT64 translations. So just to confirm whether everything is okay, the translations that were done. So on the left, you have v4, and then on the right, you have v6, source and destination. And this is how you know everything is working correctly. And then I'm also going to show NAT64 statistics. And you can see for NAT64, we have some hits, 23 packets translated from v4 to v6. And you'll notice that we're using our network specific prefix, not the well-known prefix. And then when we look at the pool of addresses, we're only using one address from the range that we specified. So this is IPv4. In this demonstration, we looked at how to configure NAT64 and DNS64 to enable v6 only hosts to communicate with a v4 only server. But there's a limitation to this, whereby you cannot use IPv4 literals. It relies heavily on DNS. Our next section, we look at 464 XLAT, which solves this problem. Because when you have applications that use IPv4 literals, NAT64 doesn't work. 464 XLAT solves that. I would like to thank you for viewing and see you in the next video.